Chapter 14. You are the weakest point in our defense, Cobb said, walking through the center of the classroom, speaking to the 9 of us in our seats, our holograms not yet engaged. Your ship can accelerate at incredible speeds and make turns you can't survive. It is far more capable than you are. If you die up there, it won't be because the ship failed you. It will be because you failed the ship. A week had passed already, almost in a blur. Training each day in the simulations, doing time in the centrifuge, then sleeping each night in the cockpit of the ancient ship, I was beyond tired of unseasoned rat and mushrooms. G-forces are your biggest enemy, Cobb continued, and you can't just watch your G-forces. You have to be aware of which direction they're pushing on you. Human beings can take a reasonable amount of G-force backward, like when you're going in a straight line. But if you pull up or do a hard bank, the G-forces will push downward, forcing the blood out of your head into your feet. Many people will G-lock, go unconscious, after pulling only 9 or 10 Gs that way. And if you turn on your axis, then boost another direction like we've been practicing, well, you can easily push over 100 Gs, enough to turn your insides to soup by the sudden jerk in momentum. Ned raised his hand. So why do we learn those moves? Grav caps, I said. Cobb pointed at me and nodded. Your ships can compensate for sudden extreme G-forces. DDF vessels have things called gravitational capacitors. When you change direction or accelerate quickly, the grav caps will engage and deflect the force. Grav caps can work for about 3 seconds before needing a brief moment to recharge, so they're of most use when making tight turns. I knew this already. In fact, Ned probably would have known it if he'd been forced to study for the tests. So I let my mind wander, thinking of my broken down ship. I hadn't made much progress in the ancient ship, as I'd spent most of my time hunting and curing rat meat. I still needed to find a power matrix somewhere. Your ships have 3 kinds of weapons, Cobb said. Wait, weapons? My attention snapped back to class. I noted Bim also perking up. It was cute how he responded to any mention of weapons in an overeager, puppy sort of way. Yes, Bim, Cobb said. Weapons. Don't wet yourself with excitement. The first of these 3 is your basic destructor. Your primary weapon, but also your least effective. It shoots a concentrated beam of energy, and is usually fired in bursts at short range. Cobb stopped near Kimmelin's seat. Or, less often, it can be charged for very precise long-range sniping. Most pilots only use this function for finishing off disabled ships, or perhaps picking off an enemy during an ambush. Hitting an active target at distance with a destructor requires incredible skill. Kimmelin grinned. Don't get cocky, Cobb said, walking on. A destructor is particularly useless against a shielded foe. Though you'll still fire at them at every opportunity, as it's human nature to hope for a lucky hit. I'll attempt to beat this out of you, but honestly, even full pilots cling to their destructors like they're scudding letters from their childhood sweetheart. Bim chuckled. That wasn't a joke, Cobb snapped. Holograms on. We powered up the devices, and suddenly we were on the launch pad. Once we were up in the air and had done verbal confirmations, Cobb's voice crackled in my helmet speaker. All right, stars, help us. It's time for you to start shooting. The destructor trigger is the button next to your index finger on the control sphere. Go ahead. I hesitantly pressed the button. A burst of 3 white-hot blasts shot in rapid succession from the pencil nose of my ship. I grinned and pressed it again and again, firing bursts one after another. Just like that, I was granted the very power over life and death. And for more than rats. Don't wear it out, Spin, Cobb said. See the dial on your throttle? The one you can rotate with the thumb of your left hand? That's the destructor rate control. Top position is steady fire. It's led by every drooling, meathead, idiot pilot who didn't train with me. What about those of us who are still drooling meathead idiots? Ned asked, but did train with you. Don't sell yourself short, Nedder, Cobb said. I've never seen you drool. Second position on the dial is burst. Third position is a charged, long-range shot. Indulge yourselves. Get it out of your system. He made a bunch of Krell ships appear in the air in front of us. They didn't fly or move, they simply hung there. Target practice? I'd always wanted to do target practice, ever since I'd been a little girl, throwing rocks at other, more nefarious-looking rocks. Together, we launched a hailstorm of death and devastation through the air. We missed. We missed by what seemed like miles. Even though the ships weren't that far away, I gritted my teeth and tried again, switching between different destructor modes, angling my ship with my control sphere, firing with everything I had. But scud. For how close everything looked, there sure was a lot of empty space to shoot. Jerkface finally got a hit, knocking one of the ships down in a spray of fire. I grunted, focusing on a single vessel. Come on! Go ahead, Quirk, Cobb said. Oh, I thought I'd give them the chance, sir, Kimmelin said. Winning isn't always being the best, you know. Humor me, Cobb said. Well, okay. Her ship charged for a couple seconds, then released a focused line of light, which blasted a Krell ship from the sky. She repeated the feat again, and again, then did it a fourth time. Kind of like trying to hit the floor with a rock, sir, she said. They aren't even moving. How? I asked in awe. How did you learn to shoot like that, Quirk? Her father's training, Earl said. Remember the story with the mushroom that looked like a squirrel? FM laughed, and I even heard a peep out of Morningtide. But no, I didn't know any stories about mushrooms or squirrels. It had to be a story they chatted about at night in the bunks, while I was walking back to my cave. I pressed hard on my destructor button, and managed, remarkably, to finally hit one of the targets. And it sprayed sparks as if, and the way it sprayed sparks as it fell was immensely satisfying. All right, Cobb said. That's enough of that stupidity. I'm shutting down your destructors. But we only just got them, Dim said. Can't we do a little dogfighting or something? Sure, all right, Cobb said. Here you go. The remaining Krell fighters, the dozen or so we hadn't managed to shoot down, suddenly came streaking toward us, destructors blazing. Hurl let out a whoop, but I snapped into focus and dove out of the way. Kimmelin went down first, in an immediate flash of lights and sparks. I dove into a twirling spin, watching the red line on my canopy that indicated in the real world how much force I'd be feeling. Cobb was right. The grav caps protected me when I did a quick turn, but I had to be careful not to run them out mid-turn, then slam myself with all that G-force. I pulled up, and fire and explosions surrounded me, debris from the ships of other cadets raining down. We've tried to reverse engineer Krell technology, Cobb said in a calm voice, a striking contrast to the intensity around me. Ned screamed as he was hit. Morningtide went down quickly. But we have failed. They have better destructors and better shields. That means, fighting them, you're outgunned and out-armored. I was consumed entirely with survival. I swerved, dodged, and spun. 3 Krell ships, 3, swooped in on my tail, and one hit me with a destructor shot. I cut right hard, but another shot took me, and the warning light started flashing on my control panel. Shield down. You'll have to hit a Krell a half-dozen times to bring down their shields, Cobb said, but they will do the same to you with 2 or 3 hits. I pulled up into a loop. Blasts marked the deaths of my companions, flares in the dim sky. Only one other ship was still flying, and I knew, without needing to see the numbers in the fuselage, that it would be Jorgen. He was a way better pilot than I was. That still grated on me. I growled, spinning in the wide loop, trying to get one of my enemies into my sights. Almost there. My controls went dead. The ship stopped responding. During that loop, I'd redlined the G-forces, and the grav caps had run out. Though my body couldn't feel it here, if I'd been in an actual ship, I'd have passed out. A Krell ship disposed of me with a passing, almost offhand shot, and my hologram fuzzed. Then my canopy vanished, and I was in the classroom. Jorgen managed to last another 17 seconds. I counted. I sat back in my seat, pulse thumping rapidly. That had been like witnessing the end of the world. Let's assume you are approaching competence, Cobb said. A remarkable fantasy, I realize, but I'm ever an optimist. If you managed to fly better than the average Krell ship, you'd still be at a severe disadvantage using only destructors. So we're screwed? FM said, standing up. No. We just have to fight differently. And we have to even the odds somehow. Strap back in, cadet. She did, and the hologram started again with us in the sky in a line. The Krell ships reappeared in a silent formation in front of us. I eyed them more suspiciously this time, index finger itching to spray them with destructor fire. Dragon Boy, Cobb said to Arturo. Press the button next to your 3rd and 4th fingers. Hit them both at once. My ship shook, and a little pop of light exploded from Arturo, like a radiant splash of water. Hey, Earl said. My shield is down. Mine too, said Kimmelin. And mine, Arturo added. Mine's up, Jerkface said, as did several others. Arturo's shield went down, I thought, as did those of the two ships next to him. I leaned forward. I looked into the cockpit canopy, keenly interested. In my days of studying, I'd been taught booster specs, flight patterns, acclivity rings, basically everything about the fighters except weapon specifics. The IMP, Cobb said. Inverted Magellan Pulse. It will completely negate any protective shield a ship emits, including, unfortunately, your own. It has an extremely short range, so you'll basically have to be crawling into a Krell's engines before you activate it. The key to beating the Krell is not to pound them with destructor shots. It's to outmaneuver them, team up against them, and outthink them. Krell fly individually. They barely support one another. You, instead, will fight in traditional wingmate pairs. You'll work to engage the IMP in a way that gives your wingmate a clear, unshielded shot. But you also always need to be aware. Engaging the IMP leaves you exposed and vulnerable until you reignite your shield. A sudden burst of light from nearby sent FM cursing softly. Sorry, Warning Tide said with her thick accent. Sorry. It was the most I'd heard out of her all day. What's the third weapon? Jerkface said. Light lances, I guessed. I'd read the term, but again, the specifics on what they did weren't covered in the book. Ah, so you know about them, Spin, Cobb said. I thought you might. Give us a little display. Okay. But why me? They work very similarly to their smaller cousins, light lines. I have a hunch you've got some experience there. How did he know? I wore my light line to class, as I needed to get in and out of my cavern, but I thought I'd kept it hidden under the long sleeve of my jumpsuit. Thumb and little finger, Cobb said. Buttons on either side of the control sphere. Well, sure. Why not? I pushed the throttle forward and moved out of line, approaching the hovering Krell ships. I picked one, the wires at its rear floating down behind it. Like all ships, it had an acclivity ring, with a standard size of about 2 meters in diameter, glowing with a soft blue light underneath. The Krell looked even more sinister up close. It had that strange, unfinished feel to it, though it wasn't actually incomplete. Those wires hanging from the back were probably intentional, and its design was simply alien. Not unfinished, but made by creatures that didn't think like humans did. I held my breath, then clicked the buttons Cobb had indicated. A line of molten red light launched from the front of my ship and attached to the Krell ship. As Cobb had indicated, it worked just like the light line, but larger, and launched from my ship like a harpoon. Wow, I thought. Light lances, Cobb said. You've probably seen their smaller cousins on the wrists of pilots. They were used by the engineering department in the old fleet to anchor themselves while they worked on machines in zero gravity. Spin has one, somehow, which I've decided not to mention to the quartermaster. You can thank me by shutting up when I'm talking, Cobb said. Light lances work like a kind of energy lasso, connecting you to something you spear with it. You can use it to attach an enemy ship, or you can use it on the terrain. The terrain? Arturo asked. Do you mean we stick ourselves to the ground? Hardly, Cobb said. The sky exploded above, and I looked up, gasping, as the ubiquitous haze of debris began to rain down balls of fire. Superheated metal and other junk turned into falling stars by the heat of re-entry. I quickly spun my ship, then pushed on the throttle and moved back toward the line. It took a few minutes for the debris to start falling around us, some chunks glowing more brightly than others. They moved at a variety of speeds, and I realized some of the falling junk had acclivity stone glowing blue inside it, giving it some lift. The junk smashed into several of the Krell fighters, pulverizing them. The Krell usually attack during debris falls, Cobb said. The Krell don't have light lances, and though they tend to be maneuverable, a DDF ship with a good pilot can outpace and outfly them. You'll often engage them in the middle of the falling debris. In there, the light lances will be your best tool, which is why we're going to spend the next month training on them. Any idiot with a finger can fire a destructor, but it takes a pilot to fly the debris and use it as an advantage. I've seen pilots use the light lances to pull Krell into one another, stick them in space junk, or even yank a wingmate out of danger. You can pivot unexpectedly by attaching yourself to a big chunk and swinging around it. You can toss debris at your enemy, instantly overwhelming their shield and smashing them. The more dangerous the battlefield, the more advantage the better pilot will have, which, when I'm done, will be you. We watched the debris fall, burning light reflecting against the canopy. So, I said, you're saying that by the end of our training, you expect us to be able to use grappling hooks made of energy to smash our enemies with flaming chunks of space debris? Yes. That, I whispered, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Chapter 15. I tied off the set of wires, working by red-orange glow in the otherwise dark cavern, then wrapped them in tape. There, I thought, stepping back and wiping my brow. Over the last few weeks, I managed to find a working power matrix in an old water heater at an igneous recycling facility. I knew the guy who worked there, and he let me trade him rat meat to look the other way as I did some salvaging. I'd also retrieved some supplies from one of my hidden dumps outside Igneous. I'd made a new spear gun, and had fashioned a kitchen that had a real hot plate, a dehydrator, and some spices. I'd stopped by my home to fetch Bloodletter, my old stuffed bear. He made a fine pillow. It had been good to see my mother and Gran, though of course I hadn't told them I was living in a cave. Well, I asked Doomslug the Destroyer, think it will work? The little yellow and blue cave slug perked up on the nearby rock. Work? She fluted. She could imitate noises, but there was always a distinctly fluty sound to what she said. I was pretty sure she was just mimicking me, and to be honest, I didn't know if she was a she. Weren't slugs like oath or something? Work! Doomslug repeated, and I couldn't help but take in that opportunistic light. I flipped the switch on the power matrix, hoping my little hot wire job would hold. The diagnostic panel on the side of the ship flickered, and I heard a strange sound coming from the cockpit. I hurried over and climbed onto the box I used as a ladder to get in. The sound came from the instrument panel. It was low, kind of industrial. Metal vibrating? After I listened for a moment, it changed tone. What is that? I asked Doomslug, looking to my right hand. As expected, finding her there. She could move very quickly when she wanted to, but seemed to have an aversion to doing so when I was watching. Doomslug cocked her head to one side, then the other. She shivered the spines on her back and imitated the noise. Look how low the lights are, I tapped the control panel. This power matrix isn't big enough either. I'll need one made for a ship or a building, not a water heater. I turned it off, then checked the clock on my light line. Keep an eye on things while I'm gone. Gone, Doomslug said. Don't have to act so excited about it. I quickly changed into my jumpsuit, and before I left, I took another glance at the ship. Fixing this thing is way beyond me, I thought, so why am I trying? With a sigh, I hooked the end of my light line to a rock, threw it up to smack against a stone near the entrance to my cave, then grabbed hold and hauled myself up to the crevice so I could shimmy out and head to class for the day. Roughly an hour and a half later, I shifted my helmet, which was chafing my head, then grabbed my ship's controls and buzzed past an enormous floating piece of debris. In real life, that would have been dropping in a fiery blaze, but in the hologram, Cobb had suspended the chunks in midair for us to practice on. I was getting pretty good at dodging between them, though I wasn't certain how well that skill would translate once they started, hurtling down from above with horrific destructive potential. But hey, baby steps. I launched my light lance, which burst from a turret on the underside of my ship. A glowing line of orange-red energy speared the large piece of space junk. Ha! I said. Look at that! I hit it! After I flew past the chunk, however, the light lance grew taut, and my momentum caused me to pivot. My ship spun on the line, setting off my grav caps, then slammed into a different chunk of floating debris. When I was younger, we played a game with a ball and a string, connected to a tall pole. If you pushed on the ball, it would spin around the pole. The light lances were similar, only in this game the debris was the pole and I was the ball. Cobb sighed in the air of my helmet as my hologram went blank upon my death. Hey, I pointed out, at least I hit the thing this time. Congratulations. he said, on that moral victory as you die. I'm sure your mother will be very proud once your pin is sent back to her as a melted piece of slag. I huffed and sat up, leaning out of my cockpit to look toward Cobb. He walked to the center of space in the room, speaking into a hand radio to communicate with us through our helmets, even though we were all right next to each other. The 10 mock pits made a circle, and the floor in the center had its own projector, one that spat out a tiny reproduction of what we were experiencing. 8 little holographic ships buzzed around Cobb, who watched us like some enormous god. Bim slammed straight into a piece of debris near Cobb's head, and the shower of sparks looked kind of like our instructor had a suddenly really great idea. Perhaps the realization that the lot of us were worthless. Zoom out your proximity sensors, Bim, Cobb said. You should have seen that piece floating there. Bim stood up out of his hologram and pulled off his helmet. He ran his hand through his blue hair, looking frustrated. I pulled back into my cockpit as my ship reappeared at the edge of the battlefield. Morningtide was there, hovering, watching the others flip between chunks of metal. It looked like Grand's description of an asteroid field, though of course it was an atmosphere, not up in space. We usually engaged the Krell at a height of somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 feet. Bim's ship appeared near us, though he wasn't in it. Morningtide, Cobb said. Don't be timid, cadet. Get in there. I want you to swing from so many scudding lines of light that you get rope burns. Morningtide flew timidly into the field of debris. I shifted my helmet again. It was seriously bothering me today. Maybe I needed a break. I turned off my hologram and stood up out of my seat to stretch, watching Cobb as he inspected a run that Jerkface was doing with Ned as a wingmate. I put my helmet on my seat, then walked over to Morningtide's hologram. I peeked in, my head appearing as if from the top of her cockpit. She was huddled inside, an intense look on her tattooed face. She noticed me, then quickly took off her helmet. Hey, I said softly. How's it going? She nodded in Cobb's direction. Rope burns, she asked softly with her thick accent. It's when you rub your hand on something so fast it hurts, like you scrape yourself on a carpet or on ropes. He just wants you to practice more with the light lance. Ah, she tapped her control panel. What you said before about proximation. We can zoom the proximity sensors, I said, speaking slowly. I reached down and pointed at a toggle. You can use this to make the sensor range bigger. Understand? Ah, yes. Yes. Understand. She smiled thankfully. I gave her a thumbs up and pulled out of her hologram. I caught Cobb glancing at me, and he seemed approving, though he quickly turned away to yell at Hurl, who was trying to get FM to bet her dessert on the outcome of the next run. Perhaps it would have been easier for Cobb to explain himself better, but Morningtide did seem to understand most of the instruction. She was merely embarrassed about what she misunderstood, so I tried to check in on her. I settled into my seat, then felt around inside my helmet, trying to figure out what was bothering me. What are these lumps? I thought, prodding the inside of my helmet. Maybe the size of a requisition chit or a large washer. The round lumps were underneath the inside lining of the helmet, and each had a small metal portion at the center, sticking through the lining. Had these been there before? Problem, cadet? Cobb asked. I jumped. I hadn't seen him approaching my cockpit. My helmet, sir. Something's wrong with it. Nothing's wrong, cadet. No, look, feel in here. There are these... Nothing's wrong, cadet. Medical ordered your helmet swapped out this morning, before you arrived. It has sensors to monitor your bio readings. Oh, I said, relaxing. Well, I suppose that makes sense, but you should tell the others. It might distract some of the flight if they only swapped out your helmet, cadet. I frowned. Only mine? What kind of readings are they taking about me, then? I wouldn't want to guess. Is this a problem? I suppose not, I said, though it made me uncomfortable. I tried to read meaning into Cobb's expression, but he was stoic as he met my eyes. Whatever this was, he obviously wasn't going to tell me. But I couldn't help feeling that it had something to do with my father, and the Admiral's dislike of me. I pulled on my helmet, activating the radio, then my hologram. Bim, Cobb said in my ear, acting as if nothing had happened. You needing a sweater or something? Back into your seat. If I have to, Bim said. Have to? You want to go sweep floors instead of being a fighter pilot, boy? I've seen rocks that fly almost as well as you do. I could drop one in your seat, paint the head blue, and at least I'd stop getting lip. Sorry, Cobb, Bim said. No lip intended, but, I mean, I talked to some cadets from Firestorm Flight this morning. They've been dogfighting this entire time. Good for them. When they're all dead, you can move into their room. Cobb sighed, loudly, in an exaggerated way. Here, let's try this. A set of glowing golden rings appeared on the battlefield. They were just larger than a ship, and several were dangerously close to the floating chunks of debris. Line up and confirm, Cobb said. You heard the man, Jerkface said. Falling at my mark. The 8 of us flew to Jerkface's ship and settled into a line, and they gave him verbal confirmation. Flight ready, instructor, Jerkface said. Here are the rules, Cobb said. Each ring you pass through gets you 1 point. Once you begin a run, you have to maintain a speed of at least Mag 1, and you can't circle around if you miss a ring. There are 5 rings, and I'll let you each do 3 runs throughout the course. Highest score gets 2 desserts tonight. But a warning, if you crash, you're out with your score frozen where it was before you died. I perked up and tried not to dwell on the idea that the prize was useless to me. At least this might distract me from the uncomfortable helmet. A game? Hurl said. Like, you're actually going to let us have fun? I can have fun, Cobb said. I know all about having fun. Most of it involves sitting and dreaming of the day when you all stop asking me stupid questions. Ned chuckled. That wasn't a joke, Cobb said. Go. Hurl whooped and hit her overburn, zipping toward the debris field. I responded nearly as fast, accelerating to Mag 3 and almost beat her to the first ring. I flew through it right behind her, then glanced at my radar. Bim, FM, and Morning Tide were on my tail. Arturo and Ned flew in formation, as they often did. I expected Kimmelin to be last, but she actually flew ahead of Jerkface, who delayed for some reason. I focused on the course, racing to the next ring. The third one was practically behind a big chunk of debris. The only way through at speed would be to use a light lance to turn extra sharp. Hurl whooped again and executed a near-perfect hook turn through the ring. I made the tactical decision to shoot past it, which proved wise as Bim tried to pivot through it and smashed right into the chunk of debris. Scud! He yelled as his ship exploded. Jerkface still hasn't started the course, I noted. I made the 4th ring, levered between 2 chunks of debris, but missed the last one, which was behind a large floating metal box, requiring a light lance turn to spin around it. I ended that run with 3 points, though Hurl got 4. I hand counted the others. Poor Kimmelin crashed getting to the 4th ring. The rest of us curved around the outside of the debris field for another run, and Jerkface finally flew on his first run. He was watching to see us go through, I realized. He was scouting the battlefield. Clever. Indeed, he got 4 rings like Hurl. Hurl immediately raced in for her second run, and I realized that, in our eagerness, we'd been going several times faster than Cobb's stated minimum speed. Why would we want to fly faster? Simply to get done first? Cobb hadn't offered any points for that. Stupid, I thought. It isn't a race. It's a test of precision. I slowed down to Mag 1 as Hurl, trying to hook the 3rd ring again for the sharp turn, lost control, and slammed herself into a nearby chunk of rock. Ha! She exclaimed. She didn't seem to care that she'd lost. She just seemed happy that there was a game to it now. I focused on the 3rd ring, going over and over in my head the things Cobb had taught. As I swooped past, I launched my light lance into the asteroid, and not only hooked it, but, to my surprise, swung around on the entry line so that I curved right through the opening. Bim whistled. Nice one, Spin. I released the light lance and pulled up. You want to try this one, Arturo? Ned asked as the 2 of them flew toward the 3rd ring. I think our chances of victory are higher if we skip that ring each pass. Too bad, Ned said, then herked Arturo with his light lance and pulled him after, diving for the ring. Of course they both crashed. I hit the 4th ring easily, zipping between the 2 flying chunks of debris, but I missed the 5th one, spearing only air with my light lance. Ned, you idiot, Arturo said in my ear. Why did you do that? I wanted to see what would happen, Ned answered. You wanted... Ned, it was obvious what would happen. You just got both of us killed. Better here than the real world. Better neither. Now we won't win. I've I never eat my first dessert, though, Ned said. Bad for the bod, my friend. The two went on bickering over the radio. FM, I noticed, didn't try either of the difficult rings. She stuck to the three that were easier. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the contest. I had to beat Jorgen. It was a matter of honor. He finished his second run with 4 points again, making the third ring but skipping the last one, which was hardest. That put him at 8 points and me at only 7. FM, playing it safe, would be at 6. I wasn't sure about Morningtide, but she tried the last ring and missed, so I was probably ahead of her. The 4 of us remaining swooped around for our final run. Again, Jerkface hung back, waiting for the rest of us to go first. Fine, I thought, hitting Overburn and zipping through the first ring. I had to hit every one of these to have a chance. FM, notably, didn't try to fly through even the first ring. She just zoomed carefully over the top of the course. FM, what are you doing? Cobb asked. I figured these clowns would all get themselves killed, sir. I could probably win without any points at all. No, I thought, streaking to the second ring. He said we keep our points if we crash. We merely can't get any more. So she wouldn't win, careful or not. Cobb had accounted for that. I approached the third ring, hands sweating. Come on, go! I launched the light lance and hit the debris square on, but didn't push into the throttle the right way, so ended up swinging around, but missed the ring. I gritted my teeth, but disengaged the light lance and managed to pull out of the turn without smashing into the ground, or into anything. Morningtide tried the ring, and almost made it, but ended up crashing. Jerkface still waited outside, watching to see exactly how many rings he'd need to win. Clever. Again. Scud, I hated that boy. I was so distracted that I actually missed the fourth ring, which was one of the easy ones. Furious, my face growing cold, I used my light line to spear the big square piece of debris, then spun downward, curving straight through the fifth ring, which, so far as I'd seen, nobody had hit. That left me with a total of 10 points, while Jerkface was at 8. He would close that gap easily. I felt my anger boil as he finally started toward the course. Who did he think he was? Sitting back there like some ancient king, watching the plebs scramble before him? He was so arrogant. But worse, he'd been right to wait. He'd been smarter than I had, and he'd gained a distinct advantage. He was going to win. Unless a terrible idea took root in my mind. I spun and hit my overburn, accelerating to Mag 5 and sprinting back toward the starting line. Above me, Jerkface went through the first ring at a leisurely pace, at exactly the minimum speed. Hey, Spin, Ned asked. What you doing? I ignored him, turning upward, dodging through the floating pieces of debris. Ahead of me, Jerkface approached the second ring, an easy one, and the one that would bring him to 10 points. Straight on, I thought, overburning, pushing my acceleration to the red line of where, in a climb like this, I'd risk dropping unconscious. Spin? Bim asked. I grinned, then smashed my ship right into Jerkface's, overwhelming both shields and blowing us to pieces. We exploded into light. Then we both reformed at the edge of the battlefield. What the hell was that? Jerkface shouted. What were you thinking? I was thinking how to win, I said, sitting back in my seat, satisfied. The way of the warrior, Jerkface. We're on a team, Spin, he said. You brash, self-centered, slimy piece of... Enough, Jorgen. Cobb snapped. Jerkface fell quiet, but notably didn't give his usual obsequious, yes, sir. The hologram switched off, and Cobb walked over to my seat. You're dead. I won anyway, I said. It's a tactic that would be useless in a real fight, Cobb said. You don't get to take home points if you're dead. I shrugged. You set the rules, Cobb. 10 points for me, 9 for Jerkface. It isn't my fault they doesn't get to try for the last few points. Yes, it is, Jerkface said, standing up out of his cockpit. It is absolutely your fault. Enough, son, Cobb said. It's not worth getting worked up over this. You lost. It happens. He glanced at me. Though I guess I'll be wanting to change the rules of the game. I stood up, grinning. 5-minute break, Cobb said. Everyone cool down and don't strangle one another. That causes too much damn paperwork. He hobbled over to the door and stepped out, perhaps to fetch his midday coffee. Kimlin ran over to my seat, her dark curls bouncing. Spin, that was wonderful. What does the saint say about games? I asked. You can't win if you don't play, Kimlin said. Obviously. Obviously? She grinned again. Ben walked by and gave me a thumbs up. Over his shoulder, I saw Jerkface glaring at me with unmitigated hostility as Arturo and Ned tried to calm him down. Don't worry, Jorg, Ned said. You still beat Arturo. Thank you very much, Ned, Arturo snapped. Kimlin left the classroom to get something to drink, and I settled into my seat and dug one of my canteens out of my pack. I made sure to refill all 3 each day at the bathroom. So, Bim said, leaning against my hologram projector, you're really into warriors and things, eh? They inspire me, I said. My grandmother tells stories about ancient heroes. You have any favorites? Probably Beowulf, I said, then took a long pull of water from the canteen. He literally slew a dragon and ripped the arm off a monster. He had to resort to his bare hands after his sword wouldn't cut the thing. And then there's Tashin the Mani. She slew the great warrior Custer, and Conan the Cimmerian, who fought in ancient times before writing. Yeah, they were great, Bim said and winked. I mean, I hadn't heard of them until now, but I'm sure they were great. I'm thirsty. He blushed and walked off, leaving me confused. What was... He was flirting with me, I realized, stunned. Or, well, trying to. Was that possible? I mean, he was actually cute, so why would he? I looked at him again, and caught him in the middle of what seemed like a blush. Scud. That was the strangest thing that had happened to me since starting flight school, and I spent my mornings talking to a slug. I thought about guys, but my life hadn't exactly left me time for that kind of thing. The last time I'd had any romantic inclination had been when I'd been 8 and given Rig a particularly nice hatchet I'd made out of a rock and a stick. Then had decided he was gross the next week, because, well, I'd been 8. I jumped to my feet. Bim? I said. He looked at me again. You ever heard of Odysseus? No, he said. He was an ancient hero who fought in the greatest war that ever happened on Earth, the Trojan War. It's said he had a bow so strong that, other than him, only a giant could pull the string back. He had blue hair, you know? Yeah? Bim asked. Pretty cool, I said, then immediately sat down, taking a long gulp from my canteen. Was that smooth? That was smooth, right? I wasn't sure what Sun Tzu or Beowulf would say about flirting with cute guys. Maybe share the skulls of your enemies with them as a gesture of affection? I felt kind of warm and gooey, in a good way, until I spotted Jerkface across the room, watching me. I gave him a hard glare. He pointedly turned to Ned and Arturo. I guess we shouldn't expect real honor, he said, from the daughter of Zine Nightshade. A bolt of coldness shot through me. Who? Ned asked. Wait, who did you say she was? You know, Jerkface said, voice loud enough to carry through the entire room. Call sign, Chaser, the coward of Alta. The room went quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes turning toward me. How had he found out? Who had told him? I stood up. Scud. Even Kimlin seemed to know who Chaser was. Her canteen dropped from her fingers and bounced against the floor, spilling water that she didn't notice. Who? Morningtide asked. What did happen? I wanted to flee, hide, escape all those eyes, but I would not run. My father, I said, was not a coward. I'm sorry, Jerkface said. I'm only stating the official history. He stared at me, that arrogant, so punchable face. I found myself blushing in embarrassment, then in anger. I shouldn't feel embarrassed. I'd lived practically my entire life with this mantle. I was accustomed to those looks, those whispers. And I wasn't ashamed of my father, right? So why should I care what the others had found out? Good. Fine. I was happy to be Chaser's daughter. It was just that it had felt nice to be able to make my own way without standing in anyone's shadow. That thought made me feel like I was betraying my father, and that made me even more angry. She lives in a cave, you know, Jerkface said to Arturo. She goes there every night. The elevator operators told me they watch her hike out into the wilderness because she's not. He cut off as Cobb stepped in with a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. Cobb focused immediately on me, then Jerkface. Back to your seats, he snapped at us. We still have work to do today. And Quirk, did you drop that canteen? Kimberlin unfroze and picked up her canteen, and everyone climbed into their cockpits without another word. At one point, shortly after we went back to practicing with our light lances, I caught Cobb looking at me with a grim expression, with eyes that seemed to be saying, It was going to happen eventually, cadet. Are you going to give in? Never. But that didn't stop me from feeling sick to the whole set of drills. A few hours later, I trailed out of the women's bathroom, canteens refilled. A new pair of MPs walked me to the doors and saw me out. Then, like normal, left me there. I trudged across the base grounds, feeling frustrated, angry, and alone. I should have kept going out of the base, on toward my cave, but instead I took a path around the training building, one that let me walk past the mess hall. I looked through the window there and spotted the others seated along a metal table, chatting, laughing, arguing. They'd even bullied Jerkface into joining them tonight, a rare treat for the plebs, as he usually drove off to the exclusive elevator. Ned said it could reach the lower caverns in under 15 minutes. So there he was, enjoying what I was forbidden, after tossing away my secret like a fistful of expired rations. I hated him. In that moment, kind of hated them all. I almost hated my father. I stalked off into the night, leaving the base through the front gates. I turned to my left toward the orchard, and the shortcut through it toward the wilderness. My path took me straight past the small hangars where Jerkface parked his hover car. I stopped there in the darkness, eyeing his bay. The front door was closed this time, but the side door was open, and I could see the car inside. It took me all of about half a second to come up with another really terrible idea. Looking around, I didn't see anyone watching. Darkness had come early tonight, the skylights moving away, and the orchard workers had already gone home. I was far enough from the front gates of the base that the guards there shouldn't be able to see me in the gloom. I slipped in the side of the small hangar and closed the door, then lit my light line for a bit of illumination. I found a wrench on the wall of the small shed, then pulled open the hood of the blue hover car. Jerkface could walk home tonight. It would only be fair. After all, I had to walk home. And tonight I would have to do it while lugging a large, car-sized power matrix tied to my back.